Hello, thank you for watching our Watch and Learn with Handi Quilter. Today we're going to be talking about some frequently asked questions we get for Pro Stitcher. And I'm Johnny Barfus. With me is
Kristina Whitney. We're Handi Quilter Studio educators.
So we get a lot of questions, especially on the phone or online, about different tasks that people are doing in Pro Stitcher. So we're just going to go through some of the really basic ones that we get all the time, so you can just have that for your future reference, okay? So first of all, we have our quilt loaded up. We've quilted what, like 3 or 4 rows, I think, and we're going to talk about repositioning your design after shutdown. So I've quilted part of my quilt. I shut it down. Well, Kristina has. So actually, Kim quilted this one for us while we were doing something else. So, Kristina, walk us through the steps, if you would.
Okay, so first of all, we're going to talk about repositioning after a shutdown, or if you have a motor error or anything like that. We're also going to be talking about advancing the quilt from row to row, keeping things square, and also cropping the bottom of an edge to edge. So, let's get started.
Thank you.
Okay, so we just came in, the machine's been turned off, we just turned it back on. My Pro Stitcher screen is empty right now. So the first step is to find the design that I saved. And before you ever shut down your machine, make sure you do save your design and that you remember where you saved it. So
I say before you start stitching out,
yes.
You save your design. We always say, save your design before you start stitching.
Yes, because we've all had those instances where something happens and we need to be able to pull it back up. Okay, so finding your design is going to depend on where you saved it. So my design is actually saved as a workspace. So I'm going to go to the File tab at the top and I'm going to select my workspace. If I had saved it as a selected design, I would go to Design. So I'm going to click on Workspace, and it actually shows up as the top one because that was the last one that was loaded. But I'm going to go ahead and just hit Open so you can see how I found it. So it's saved on a USB stick. So it's on the D drive here. And then it just popped up right there. It's my swirl. So I'm going to tap on it and open it. So now I have my design on my screen. I also have a dotted pink box. And I am going to actually move that design so that it now matches up with what I've already quilted. So,
what is that dotted pink box?
That is the area box that I originally had set up, but it's been moved.
Right.
So it's been changed, it's not in the correct positioning. So that is a key point with whenever you open up a saved design, it's not going to be in the same position. So we have to get it positioned correctly before we can do anything else. Okay? So Johnny, if people can't remember these steps, where can they find this information that we're going to be covering today?
Okay, you'll want to go to prostitcher.com. That's www.prostitcher.com. There's a tab over on the right-hand side for Pro Stitcher, and there's a drop-down for Education. That's where you'll find the latest videos and tutorials for Pro Stitcher and all these steps that we're going through. Yep. So we do have a lot of videos on YouTube as well, but prostitcher.com is where you're going to find the most up-to-date videos and tutorials using our latest versions of Pro Stitcher.
Yep. So you can actually even print out the tutorial, keep it with you by your machine, and go through it step by step each time until you get more familiar with it.
Yeah, I tell new users, if you're just new to Pro Stitcher, there's tutorials on that page that are really great for learning just the basic steps. I tell new users, print every single one of them off, put on some scrap fabric, and just go through step by step, practicing each one of those until you really get the hang of it. Yep.
So I might do things a little bit differently than the tutorial today because this is the way I do it. And there are many ways that you can get from step A to step B, or point A to point B, depending on how you are comfortable. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my quilt top, and I've got my last row stitched out already. So when I shut down for the night, I purposely do not advance my quilt. I want to be able to have that reference when I come back and set it back up. So I'm going to move my machine over to the first stitch of the last row that I stitched. So right about here, and I'm just going to drop my needle there. And if you look at the screen, I'm going to refresh. My crosshairs are clear over here, but I'm wanting to get to this point because that's the row that I just finished stitching. So what I'm going to do is change my start point down to this little spot here. And I'm going to do that by hitting my Pro Stitcher tab. Then I'm going to click on New Start and End, move over to my sidebar, and in this jump section, I've got these arrows here. And if you watch the start wheel, the little green circle with the X through it, watch it as I hit the jump buttons. It's going to jump down one row to the next row, and then that is the row that I just finished quilting. So that start point right there is where my needle is on my quilt top. So now I'm going to go up here to the Modify tab. Under Modify, I'll click on Reposition and go over to my sidebar here. And we've got lots of tools over here to help us reposition. But since I have my machine already at the start point, I'm going to do Start Point. And I'll refresh that again, that little house at the bottom, and that moved my design over so it is now positioned with my actual quilt top. Okay, so I've got my new start point lined up with the row that I've already stitched. So now I'm going to go to the Modify tab up at the top, click on Reposition. Mine's already selected, so it's green. So if I hit it again, it goes away. So make sure the Reposition is green. We're going to come over to our right-hand sidebar, and you can see we've got all of these different options here. And these are in relation to our needle. So my needle is at the start point. So I have this option here. I'm going to click Start Point, and it's going to jump my design up to my crosshair. So let's refresh so you can see that. So now my needle, my crosshair, those are the same thing. They're lined up with the design on the screen as well as the already quilted row on my quilt top. We've got this pink area box here that we no longer need. So we'll just go up to the Area tab and clear that out so we don't have to see it and it doesn't get in our way. And I can refresh, and we are now in proper position. But what's a good thing to do at this point, Johnny?
So at this point, I like to check what is already quilted with what's under the needle. So you had mentioned the needle is your crosshairs, the crosshairs equal your needle. This is a really easy way if you have the laser on there. I think we have our laser turned off, right?
We do.
So for filming, we turn the laser off, but you can line up your needle with what you've already quilted. This pattern is great. It has points. So show us how you would do that.
Okay, so I do have a point right here, so I'm going to take my needle over. So it's right at that point, and then I'm going to look at my screen and make sure that the crosshairs at that same correlating spot on my screen. And I'll go ahead and I'll just check a couple more spots, and my pattern is pretty good.
Nice.
Now, Johnny, if it's like 1/8 of an inch off, what do I do?
Oh, you sweat, you cry. No, just keep quilting. It'll be all right. I especially love this pattern. I think this one's called Swirl 2. It stitches out really fast. And what I have been suggesting too for beginning quilters is choose a pattern that if it doesn't nest exactly right together, that you're not going to notice it. So this is a great one. We've offset it, the rows. And so we're going to show you when we advance. But if it's off by 1/8 of an inch, you won't be able to tell. And nobody will notice that it's not exactly lined up. So if you're just starting edge to edge, just choose a pattern that's not going to nest exactly.
Correct. And also when you are quilting, you're going to get a little bit of draw in. So one side of the quilt, it might line up perfectly. The other side of the quilt, it might be off a little bit. So that's why I like to always kind of check in the middle section and work my way out. So at this point, our design is now in position. We are lined up with what's on our quilt top, but I don't have room to stitch the next row. So at this point, we're going to advance.
And this is the tutorial we mentioned, edge to edge with drag and drop, that is on prostitcher.com.
Yep. So what I'm going to do is if you look at the screen, I'm moving my machine, which is moving my crosshair. I want this horizontal crosshair to be above, just slightly above my next row that I need to stitch. And I'm going to zoom in so you can see that a little bit closer. I hit the zoom button and I'm drawing a box around there with my finger. So this row right here is the next row I'm going to stitch. So I'm moving the machine just a little bit above that. and I'm going to drop my needle in that spot. And the reason I want my crosshair above that next row is that when I advance, I won't accidentally advance too far and I don't run the risk of banging into my back bar.
Right, that's a great tip.
Okay, so my needle is in the down position. I'm going to come over here to my quick access bar and hit the word drag. If I do not have drag as one of my quick access tools, I can find that under modify, reposition, and it's over here on the right-hand sidebar. But that is one that you can program in, and if you're doing lots of edge to edge, I highly recommend having it there. So when I tap that, it went from beige to green, meaning it's selected, and the word drop appeared. That is a good sign. When you are doing drag and drop, always make sure that it actually engages. Sometimes we touch things with our finger and it doesn't quite catch it. So use your eyes, double check, make sure that you actually did hit that button and it is active. Okay, now Johnny, you want to help me take the clamps off?
Yes.
And I'm going to pull up my top and backing ratchets. And Johnny's going to advance the quilt with the needle in the fabric. And that's plenty of room because that's the end of my quilt top. So with the needle still down, I'm going to tighten up my bars, smooth everything out, reattach my clamps.
This is a great tip. If you can get a closer shot of that. If your backing isn't quite big enough, you can add a little tape, twill tape or piece of fabric and just pin it on there. So your machine's not going to hit your side clamps.
Okay.
Like so.
So we've got everything positioned. Thank you, Johnny. So now we're going to come back over again and hit that drop button, turning it off. So now it is beige and says drag. At this point, I'm going to lift up my needle. I'm going to move my machine, just checking a couple of spots, making sure I'm still lined up. So I'm going up to the point of my previous stitched line. Everything's looking pretty good. Johnny, I'm at the bottom of my quilt top. I've got these pins in the way. How do I stitch without killing my machine by hitting one of the pins?
We don't want to hit a pin.
We don't want to hit a pin.
So now we would base down that bottom edge of the top of your quilt and take out the pins as you go. So show me how you would do that.
Okay, so I do this differently like every time I stitch, I do something different. I know some people like to actually stitch up here a basting line, then unpin, and then do the real basting line.
When Kelly showed us that the other day, that was really mind-blowing for me.
Should we do it that way?
Let's do it that way,
okay.
just to show her that tip.
And we can
trick.
show other ways also.
Yeah, I really like that, just because it gave you a nice edge to work with.
Yep. So I'm going to turn my basting stitch on. Make sure I turn it off before we actually start stitching though. So I'm going to stitch my sides down. And then here, I'm going to go horizontally. And I'm not going to worry about my horizontal channel locks on this one.
That's okay.
But if I am trying to make the bottom very straight, I will use my horizontal channel locks. I will do a little bit of manipulation using my hands to move the fabric to get it so it is square.
So you're doing a basting stitch, what, about an inch, half inch up from your pins?
Yeah, about half an inch up. And I'm actually going to go up my side here too, just since I'm already here. Okay, so let's pull up our bobbin thread.
Awesome.
Okay, so now I can take out all of these pins, get the pins and the leader out of the way.
Or you can just hand them to me.
Okay. It's always wonderful having an assistant.
I know, I need to find someone to be my quilting assistant at home. To be my pin manager or something.
I don't think your dog Buster would help out much.
Buster is not much help with the quilting, I'll be honest. Except for laying in the batting.
Okay, so our top leader is out of the way. We're not dealing with that anymore. And now I would come back and baste a 1/4 inch, and then this top basting will just come out. So sometimes I will actually take my pins and pin along here rather than doing the basting.
Okay.
So that's another option. It's just, again, whatever your personal preference is, what works for you. So I'm going to stitch down. I like to give it a little bit of slack as I'm changing direction on that basting stitch. And I'm just going to hold that fabric.
Isn't this quilt top so cute that Kristina made just for this video? Did you make this for someone?
You know how I am with my scraps. I just had to make something to use up some of my scraps.
Oh, I love turquoise. That's my favorite color, and I just love. We were talking earlier. I just love some of these fabrics. I have them in my collection, I think, still. So.
Yeah, it was a super fast quilt. I didn't use a pattern. I just used half square triangles. Maybe we can show the full quilt when we get done.
So cute.
Thanks, Johnny. Oh, sorry. Did I just try to take you out with the machine?
That's all right.
Got to keep you on your toes there.
That's for sure.
Okay, so
now I'm kind of concerned. We don't have enough room at the bottom of our quilt to stitch out that whole row, right?
okay, so now we've finished our basting, and I've adjusted my pattern so that it's a little bit larger than my quilt top for purposes of teaching you how to crop off the bottom of an edge to edge. Because I don't know about you, Johnny, but every time I do a big quilt and I get to the bottom, it is never perfect.
Right.
Things stretch, things shrink, things move. So I always set mine up a little bit larger than I anticipate.
Same.
And then when I get to the very bottom, I can crop it off.
Okay, show us how you do that.
So I've got my needle, so it is at the bottom of my quilt. And if you look up here on the screen, that horizontal line is in the middle of this design. And so I don't want to stitch all of this stuff that's down below because, first of all, I'm going to be hitting the pins on my backing, which isn't going to be pretty. So what I'm going to do is just walk through those steps of cropping the bottom of an edge to edge. So let's move the machine over. And at this point, it's important that you have your area closed if you haven't already closed it. I'm going to move my machine so it's to the left of my design. So all of my design is on the right-hand side of the crosshairs. And it's just about even with the bottom of my quilt top, or maybe like 1/2 inch or so, just a little bit off. Okay, I'm going to go to my area tab up at the top of the screen, and I'm going to select 2 corner. Now I'm going to move my machine to the right-hand side. Does this seem kind of familiar?
Uh-huh.
It's like setting up an area, but we're going to set up an area, and we're going to take it to outside of the design and down a little bit, and I'm going to hit 2 corner. So now I've got a pink box set up. Let me move those crosshairs out of the way. You can see I still have design below it. I want that whole bottom portion that's going to be cropped off to be inside that pink box. So to change that, I'm going to go to my right-hand sidebar. Under height, I'm going to change that. And I can put in whatever number I want, as long as it makes the pink box large enough to encase that section. Okay? So now I can go to my Modified tab. I'm going to go to Crop on the ribbon. On the right-hand sidebar, I want to crop out everything that is inside the box. So I'm going to click Inside. And now I've got all these red and green dots, and I want to get rid of those dots. So I'm going, because those dots are starts and stops.
Right.
I don't want to sit there and wait for my machine to do a tie-off at every single one of those. So I'm going to choose Edges, and now my machine will just stitch through those sections. Okay? I'm going to baseline it, bring my machine back over, and my start point is actually down at the bottom, which is kind of unusual for us. But when you do the cropping, the machine knows where it needs to go. So I'm going to go to my Pro Stitcher, I'm going to quilt and run. And Johnny, you forgot to remind me.
Hey, you need to move your start point.
Yes.
Will you show us how to do that?
I would love
So
to.
now why is that? Will you explain really quickly?
Yes. So whenever you hit the run button on your machine, the machine knows to go to your start point, which is the green circle with the X through it. If you haven't moved it to the correct row, your machine's going to take off and go to the beginning of your quilt most
Right.
likely, which is already rolled up, so you're going to hit your bar and you're going to have to start all over again. So make sure you have your start point there. If, however, you're doing drag and drop and you had you'd finished out one row, you had advanced, and you still had the option to resume, if you hit the resume button, it will automatically go to the next row.
Right.
So run goes to the very circle with the X through at the very beginning, and resume goes to your next row, or the next part.
And when you crop, you have to hit cancel. So you can't continue that edge to edge. You have to hit cancel first in order to crop the bottom. So that's why she had done that. And then she hit baseline, which moved the start point to the beginning. So now, show us how to move that start point again.
Let's do that again. So let's go to the Pro Stitcher tab, New Start and End, and I'm going to use my down arrows in the jump section for the start point, and it is now on the correct row.
Awesome.
So it is ready to stitch out. So I'm just going to bring it kind of close, hit my run button, check all my settings, proceed.
And you've turned off your base stitch now.
I've turned off my base stitch.
Excellent.
I didn't get my bobbin pulled up, so I'm going to cancel that and do it again. Where is my bobbin?
Kristina, thank you so much for providing so many learning opportunities for us today.
That's what I'm here for, Johnny.
We really appreciate that.
Oh, I've got my bobbin all the way twisted around. Because that never happens at home, does it?
No.
Okay.
Lots of good learning opportunities.
So if you do have problems when you go to start, just hit the cancel button. But then again, make sure that you have your start point in the proper position to hit your run button. So I'm going to proceed. Now I've got my bobbin thread, and I'm resuming. And we'll just let it stitch for a second. So notice it's just going to stitch along that bottom section.
Awesome. I love that design too because it stitches out so fast.
Especially when you have it at 100% speed.
I love it. It's so great. Okay, I think we covered everything.
I think we did.
Awesome. Oh, we talked about the quilt. Let's talk about the quilt really quick.
Yep.
The quilt on the wall here, this was designed and pieced by Kim Sandberg, one of our educators. And she designed it, she quilted it, everything. Isn't that beautiful?
And one thing I do want to point out with this is that it is an edge to edge.
Yeah, that's why we chose that one specifically.
Yep.
And the title of that quilt is the Moroccan Lantern. Again, designed and pieced and quilted by Kim Sandberg. And I think that's it. So be sure, if you like this video, like us here, give us a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already, and have fun quilting this week.